So I'm Diane Dieterich of C3D. I'm from Seattle, and I make architectural renderings mainly for interior designers, interior architects, real estate agents, and I teach classes in SketchUp. So what I want to talk about today is anybody that's doing similar work, you know that you're trying to find a piece that is in the real world, you're trying to put it into your SketchUp model, there's nothing in the 3D warehouse that looks exactly like it, and how much time can you spend altering or building a component because you can't bill your client, you know, an hour to like make the perfect couch in this whole house. So I want to look at how we can find things in the 3D warehouse and just look at the scale of proportions and how we can alter them to kind of closely replicate what we're trying to use in the real world in a time frame that actually makes sense in the real world. So we're going to look at 4 different models, and if any of you saw me yesterday, I had to talk really fast to get everything done, so we're going to be a little more relaxed today, which is nice. So I'm going to start with just a really simple lamp editing demo. So this is a lamp that came out of the 3D warehouse. It's kind of similar to what I want to use, except obviously the scale isn't right, the color isn't right. So I'm just going to try to like work with this model first to start with. So a good thing when you're editing a component is if you go to View, Component Edit, and click Hide Rest of Model, then when you click on that component to edit it, everything else goes away. So that's like a really good way to get rid of, especially when your model gets bigger and bigger, to just get down to what you are actually wanting to work with. And then I'm going to click on this and just kind of see how it's made. So if you're lucky, the pieces that you want to edit are already groups within the component. And here it looks like we're pretty lucky. So the next component we look at, we're going to see things aren't grouped. So figure out how to group them so then you can scale and change things within that component to work with it. So I want to, first of all, just make this part, I want to make the gold part green, so I'm just going to double click on it till I get down to that particular texture. You can tell that color is highlighted, so I know that that's the texture that I'm working on. I'm just going to go to the paint bucket tool and choose a green. So I've got that part much accomplished. So this also has to be bigger. So I'm going to use the scale button, and just remember when you scale, if you scale from a diagonal component, the whole thing is going to get bigger and smaller. If you scale from one of these are called handles on the side, you're going to change it in one dimension also. You're going to change it wider, you're going to make it taller. So we want to make this whole thing bigger, so I'm going to use a diagonal tool. But if I do that, you can see that suddenly I'm not on center anymore. So I'm going to undo that. And if you look when you push the scale button, there's actually some little tips down here at the bottom. And one of them says if you hold on Control while you do it, you're going to scale around the center. So you're going to keep it centered where it is in the model. The whole thing is going to get bigger out from there, so you don't have to go ahead and recenter it again. So I'm going to hold on Control, and I'm going to make this whole thing bigger. It does get higher up, so I'm just going to take it, and with my Move tool, I'm going to move it in the blue axes down. So I'm just going to close it so I can go back to my room and see that's about the scale that I want. But now I can see that this chord isn't long enough anymore. So let's go back and get to the component part. So if I try to select this chord, you can see that this has not been made into a group for some reason. Everything else in this component is a group, the chord isn't a group. But I can quickly make it a group so then I can scale it to be the size that I want it to be. So and if you remember our little selection tools, that if I select from right to left, everything that I'm touching is going to be selected. So that's a quick way. I just went over the middle parts of this chord. That means that all the parts of the chord up and down are going to be selected also. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and say Make Group. And then I can go ahead and scale this. So when I scale something that's really tall and thin like that, when you hit Scale, sometimes it's hard to make sure that you are on the right tab. So it's really easy, and this is another thing what happens with doors and windows. As you think you're scaling in one dimension, you actually have the little side handles. So when you're scaling and you're actually making the door thicker also. So just remember when something's really thin, if you need to, you can zoom way in and just make sure that you are on that middle handle so you're only scaling in one direction. So I'm going to go ahead and scale on this middle handle, pull down. It's going to tell me unfacing component when I've hit the part before. And that looks good. I'm going to close the component. And if we had a little more time, I might make this a little lower, but you get the idea. So now I just want to make sure that this is centered over the table. So I'm going to go to the top view, which is a little house with a chimney on it. And I'm going to go ahead and click the ceiling and right-click and just hide it so I can see the lamp and the table. So in the 3D perspective view, sometimes it's hard to see when things are centered exactly. So another good trick to do is if you go to Camera, and you're in the default perspective view, if you go ahead and click to parallel projection, that's going to take away that 3D perspective. So then it's really easy to go ahead and center this over the countertop. So I'm going to go to Edit, Unhide Last, and go back and change my view back to perspective. And pretty quickly, once, if I wasn't talking, I could do that in about 30 seconds. So it's a quick way to go ahead and find something, change it. And obviously when I do this, when you present it to a client, you're going to have this, you're going to have the picture of the real thing. But it gives them an idea of the color and the scale. And you put it in your model, and you can move on in a reasonable time frame. Any questions? We actually have time for questions today. Take a breath. All right, so let's look at more of an architectural component. So we're going to look at some windows. So what I was trying to do was trying to find a window that had kind of like craftsman details, but that had individual panes that had leaded glass in it. And I also need this window to be 8 feet wide. I need 4 panes to be in it. So again, you go to the warehouse and you start looking for things that have the pieces that you need, because you can mine the pieces that you need and start putting them together yourself. So this has got the outer frame that I need, that's got the window that I need, and I'm gonna work on putting this all together into one big clump. So let's see how these windows are made. So if I look at this, I'm gonna hit right click, hit explode. And if I'm lucky, the outside is one group and the inside is one group, but I'm not too lucky. It's all, whoever made this, it's all individual bits and pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and select either what I need or what I don't need and get rid of the rest of it. So I'm going to go ahead and select, I think it's easier to select all this part in the middle and just delete that. So just remember again a quick little thing on the selection tools. If I make a rectangle, so I've hit the space bar, and if I go from right to left, everything that line is touching even a little bit is going to get selected. If I go from left to right, the only thing that's going to get selected is everything that's totally within that selection box. So knowing those two things helps you figure out the quickest way to make a selection within your component or within your group. So another thing you can do here also is go back to parallel projection. That makes it easier to just select exactly what you need. So let me get rid of this quick. So I'm going to use that with the selection tool. I'm going to try to select all the interior window parts by going from right to left, so everything is just touching a bit. And that looks good. Go around and look in the back. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit delete. So I've got a few little spare parts left back here. So I'm just going to delete that also. And now I'm pretty much left with the exterior window frame, which is the part that I want to use. So I'm going to go over to my other leaded glass window, and let's see, this also, unfortunately, is not in pieces. So I'm going to try to select just this one leaded glass frame, and I'm going to get rid of everything else. So I'm going to try a left to right selection box. Again, it looks like everything's selected that I want. So remember when you're selecting that not only what you see that's lit up is what's selected, but anything that's back in space into eternity behind it is also selected, even if you don't see it in this window. So it's a good idea to kind of rotate around and just make sure you look at the back of your model, that there's not, you know, a wall or something else back there that suddenly becomes part of your selection and disappears, and, you know, half hour down the road you're like, what happened to my wall? So I've got this, but instead of deleting it, I want to make this into a group that I can move over to my other window. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to say make group, and let's just see if I move it away, if I've got the right selection. Looks great. Take the rest of the window and delete it. So now I've got like the pieces, if I'm building Legos that I want to put together to make into my new window. So to scale this, I need to make it into a group first. So I'm just going to select it all. I'm going to right click and say make group. And then I'm going to take my tape measure tool and I'm going to measure over 8 feet. And let's see. So I didn't have view guides on is where I saw it, but I couldn't actually, where I drew it, but I couldn't see it. So I could try this. So I'm going to select it, and if I scale it out to 8 feet, I mean, I can scale it that big, but when I turn around and look at it, the proportions of the window here are getting kind of wacky. So here's like a really cool way to get around that. So we all know about SketchUp stickiness when things are moving that we don't want to move. So here we're going to use it to our advantage. So I'm going to select just the pieces on the right-hand side. And then I'm going to, with the move tool, if I move and drag that over, whoops, let's just select it this way. So I want just the right-hand pieces chosen. And if I move those over, whoops, except I still have got the wrong pieces. Okay. Thank you. It's altitude sickness. I could do this yesterday in my sleep. So if I move just that, everything else that is attached to it because of stickiness is going to, the plane is going to expand to keep attached to what I'm moving. And I'm going to keep the scale of the side pieces. So now I've got the exterior frame in the scale that I need. Now all I need to do is take these interior leaded glass windows and make them fit into that space. So I'm going to select the window. I'm going to move it, make sure I'm on the end point in the group. Move that over to the end point of the window. And now I'm going to copy that over 4 times. So I'm going to select the window. I'm going to hit move with control. I'm going to make sure I'm on the end point in the group. I'm going to move it over until I snap to, let's see, I'm going to do that again. I'm in the wrong end point. Till I snap to the next end point. And then I'm going to say I want to make 2 more copies of this, so I wanted to make 3 copies altogether. So I'm just going to type in times 3, enter, and it's going to make that many more copies of whatever I'm moving over. So I've got the 4 windows. They don't quite fit the space. So you can scale one group of things, but you can also select multiple groups and components. So I'm just going to hold down Shift while I select all of these. And then as a group, I can scale all of these to fit my window. So we're looking pretty good, except we obviously still have 2 different wood finishes. So I'm liking the exterior wood, the kind of the dark oak, and that's the one that I want to paint onto the interior windows. But I'm a little troubled by the grain going vertically instead of horizontally, so I want to fix that first. So I'm just going to double click till I get down to the texture layer. And sometimes this is a little bug in SketchUp, if it will let you, if you can't get to the texture layer, if it doesn't show up, try closing it and just re-clicking again and see if you can get texture to show up. So I'm going to go to texture position. Again, the red is the stationary point. The green is going to rotate around that. So I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. So now I have the wood running vertically and horizontally. So I can use my paint bucket tool, and I'm using the eyedropper to sample the horizontal wood grain, and then I can paint it on the horizontal wood grain at the bottom and also on this wood sill. And now I can go ahead and edit these windows inside. So I'm going to sample the horizontal wood grain from the top. Whoops. For the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to sample the vertical wood grain, which I can find here. Oops. Except I changed it all together. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this on and go ahead and change it. Yeah.
Why do you use groups instead of components? In what you're doing now, if those four windows are
Right.
components,
And you're right.
I
I should have made them a component, so I will blame that on altitude sickness also. Normally, yes, you're absolutely right, because I want to change one, and so then it would paint them all together. Good question. Good comment. And yes?
These menus seem to be different on Mac, right?
Yeah, so this is part of the texture stuff. I'm sorry, it's different on a Mac. So there's not an eyedropper tool on the Mac. Is that one thing that you're noticing? Yeah, so if you hit B, which is the shortcut for bucket with command, you'll see your little bucket is going to switch to an eyedropper tool.
But also, if I want to change picture, it seems you have different menus than I have.
Yeah, and that's, so we talked about that in the texture class earlier, and we'll talk about it more in the workshop this afternoon if you're there. So the paint bucket tool is the one thing that's the most different, sadly, in PCs and Macs, so which makes it hard to do a demo. I was going to try to have two computers up here, and they said can't do that. So yeah, so if you want to find me later, we can talk about that. And unfortunately, I am a PC user, so I'm much more adept at how this works on a Mac. There's a great, if you talk to me later, there's a great online tutorial all about, or a handbook all about textures on the Mac, because I know it's when you're reading any manuals, it's like, do this, and then, oh, on a Mac, you can do this instead. And it's a great, like, 30-page manual about how to do all sorts of texture editing stuff. You know, I can't remember the author's name, but find me and I will point you in that direction later. All right, so if the gentleman's right, if I would have made this a component, we'd have, and finished painting, we'd have our lovely Craftsman window that now fit the replica of what we were trying to put into our model. So let's go ahead and I'm going to look at a piece of furniture. So what I actually want to make is this love seat of the Le Corbusier LC2 chair. And there actually is one in the 3D warehouse. But let's just pretend for another thing, if you were looking at something, a couch, you wanted to make it into a love seat, you want to make it a couch, or you just want to like change the proportions of a piece of furniture, how we can do that. So here's the chair, and again, this came from the 3D warehouse. Everything we're looking at today came from the 3D warehouse to start with. And let's go ahead, I'm going to explode it just to see how this chair was made. And this is great because all the bits and pieces are already their individual groups as well as the frame. So that makes it much easier to go ahead and scale different pieces on themselves. If not, like before, we could go ahead and select the pieces that we need and scale them. But just like before, if I took this, the whole thing, and tried to scale it, you can see the proportions of the arms. And this is usually what happens with furniture, is the proportions of the arms are going to get off pretty soon. So what we need to do is, again, go ahead and just change bits and pieces at once. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and take this metal frame and I'm going to just move it aside. So I'm going to hit the move tool, I'm going to move it, and I'm going to make sure that I stay in the red axis, and I'm going to hit 10 feet, enter. And then when I want to bring it back, I can just bring it back 10 feet, enter, and that gets it right back in the exact same place. I don't have to worry about like fidgeting back and forth to move it exactly where it needs to be. So I'm going to take the arm, move it aside. I'm going to copy the pieces in the middle so I can make 2 cushions instead of the 1 cushion, and then I'm going to put the whole thing back together. So let's take this arm, I'm just going to move it and not rotate it off to the side. And then I want to take the seat cushions and the seat back cushions and make 2 of them. But this piece in the middle, I just want to scale it so it's 1 long piece. I don't want 2 of those. So I'm going to go ahead and select the 2 parts. I'm going to hit move and copy, move them over. And then they actually need to be flipped. So if I right click, there is an option called flip along, and which is the same as the mirror command in CAD. So I'm going to flip it along the red direction. So I've got the cushions, but they're not quite meeting in the middle of the back. So I'm just going to go ahead and select this back cushion. I'm going to scale it. And because I can't see the middle handle, if I turn on the X-ray mode, I'll be able to see that middle handle better. And I'm just going to scale it until I touch the edge of the group in top. Turn off the X-ray mode, and now I've got my 2 cushions. So I'm going to take this bottom plate, I'm going to hit the scale tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and scale that out again, making sure that I'm on that middle handle until it also is as wide as the 2 cushions are. And then I can take the hand, the arm, not the hand, and I'm going to move it back until I'm to the end point in the component. So now I suddenly have, I've made my chair into a love seat. So I can go back over and find the frame, move it again, make sure I move it in the red direction, and just have to type in 10 feet, enter. It's going to be back magically where it needs to be, aligned to the left-hand side. And let's see if I can scale this. So this cushion is overlapping a little bit, so I can move that back. But I think the proportions are okay, so I don't have to mess with it. But if I did one, and I could do the same thing I did on the window, I could select the handle on the left-hand side, move it over, and everything would stretch along to fit. So let's move over. So I've got this couch, but here's the fabric sample that I need to put on it. So I showed this earlier in the texture demo, but if I wanted to paint this on, as you know, I'd have to go ahead and get to the edit mode and change things all at once. So a great plugin that you can find in the extension warehouse, and I've already downloaded, it's called Material Replacer. And what that lets you do is replace all the materials all at once, even if they're underneath layers of groups and components, so you don't have to double click to get down to that texture layer. So how it works, it says replace the leather black with Oasis, which is the name of this fabric, and it'll change everything all at once in 1 click, which is another great time saver. All right, so again, once you learn the tools, once you learn to really look at the groups, you could do that in a minute or 2 also. Yeah. Yeah, it'll work with any texture that you can find in SketchUp. And it'll work no matter how far it's nested inside and inside and inside something else. So yeah, it's a great plugin. All right, any other questions? So the next thing we're going to look at is looking at laying out some tile in a bathroom and also editing components and to quickly kind of figure out, and then we're going to look at Intersect with Model Tool, which is another great shortcut if you don't want to try to scale a bunch of materials to fit a particular place that you're trying to put them. So I've got a bathroom here, and you can see here's the entire bathroom. So here's a great shortcut if you're trying to get back inside a little place and you're like, how do I get to see this? Just make a section plane. So with the section plane tool, I'm going to line it to one side. I'm going to click on it to make it active, and then I'm going to move it. And now I'm inside a tiny little space. And you don't want to work with the section plane, so you can just go to View and unclick Section Plane, and now you're inside that tiny space that you're trying to work on. So what I'm going to try to do is do a tile layout on this shower wall. So we have to figure out quickly how to do tile layout, how to copy a real tile that our client has gave us, and then how to deal with this window, which means we have to cut all these pieces of tile to fit around it, and how to do that quickly. So here's the real tile down here, but first of all, just to lay something out, if you're trying to lay out tile that's got curved edges, and you're trying to fit them next to each other, it's really easy not to get on the square edge, but to get on a curved edge. So I'm just going to lay this all out really quickly with some rectangles. So whether you're doing, I'm doing tile, but if you're doing, hardy board on the exterior of a house, or, whatever kind of material you're laying out, if it's got any curves at all, just make it easy and lay it out with something simple that you can then, as a component, go ahead and change later to match your real material. So I've made this rectangle. I'm going to triple click on it, so I select it all, and I'm going to right click, I'm going to say Make Component. So I'm going to call this tile. So some of these other, excuse me, my voice is going, choices I can make here. So under the glue to, so if I pick glue to horizontal, that means that this has got to stick to a horizontal wall. It's not going to stick to the floor, but if you're making like a floor tile, you'd want it to glue to something vertical. And that way when you place it, it's going to automatically look for that kind of surface to attach itself to. And then right now, if I look, the component axis is at the front of this component, but I actually want it to be at the back of the component because that's the part that I want to stick to the wall. So if I click Set Component Axes, and I'm going to rotate around to the back of this. The way this works is you click once at the endpoint, click once on the red axis and once on the green axis, and then it might go back and for some reason it doesn't keep the horizontal. And you want to make sure that this box down here, Replace Selection with Component, is chosen, and then I'm going to say Create. So now I've got a tile rectangle that is going to be easy to lay out in my shower layout. So I'm going to select the component, I'm going to move it into my tile shoulder. I want to make sure that I move it from this back endpoint that I want to be stuck to the wall. I'm going to move it over into the shower. So it says it's on the face, so I know that the back of the tile is now stuck to the face. I don't have to go in and kind of wiggle around at all. So also remember when you're moving things in SketchUp, that once it's attached to the back wall, if I get it going in the blue axis, it's going to stay in that same orientation to the wall. So once I see it's in the blue axis, if I hold down Shift, it can't move any other direction but up and down in blue. So that helps you place things. So I'm going to go from the bottom of the component, I'm going to move it down in the blue axis. And if I'm on the edge of the component, it's going to tell me Constrain on Line Intersect Plane, which I don't know why they don't have a shorter thing to say that when it hits the bottom. So I know the bottom of my component is hit the bottom of the floor. And then same thing, I'm going to move it from the endpoint. I'm going to make sure I stay in the red axis until I get over to this corner. So I'm going to take the tile, I'm going to move and copy it over, and I'm going to use it same thing as before. I'm not sure how many it's going to take. I'm just going to say times 7. And let's move this again. Sorry, let me go back to the beginning. Make sure I'm getting from the endpoint to the next endpoint, click times 7, enter, and zoom back, and I can see that's too many, so let's try. As long as I haven't hit any other buttons, I can go ahead and change the number of copies. So I'm going to hit times, which is just the X button, times 6, enter. And that fills my space. So here's one of those things you can say, well, okay, it fills the space, but it goes over into the stud wall into the next thing. So then you can say time-wise, does it matter? You can go ahead and cut that to make it fit. But if I'm just showing this to my client and they're not seeing the next space, I'm not going to take the time to cut it exactly to fit because it doesn't fit my needs. It isn't worth it for me to do the time to cut that. And if it is, after we do the intersect with model, you can see how you could cut a whole plane at once. So now I'm going to make this run of tile. So I'm going to select them all from right to left. And again, I've selected this, but I've selected the wall behind it. So if I hold down Shift and click on something, that adds or subtracts to my selection. So it looks like I'm good, but if I go around to the back of the house, you can see I've also selected this back wall because that was back in space. So I'm going to hold down Shift and deselect that. And now I've got this row of tiles selected. So I'm going to right-click, I'm going to make that a group. So I'm going to select this group, and I'm going to move and copy it up 1. So if I move from this bottom endpoint, oops, move copy, I can go ahead and snap to the midpoint in the component above it. And now I've got like my first course of tiles. So then I can select both of these together. Again, make sure I've got anything in the back selected. Right click and make that a group. And then I can move and copy all of this up. And let's see how many times I'll need to do that. I'm going to try times 6. Oops. Let's try that again. And that's 9. I want it to get above the window, so I'm going to try times 7. And that looks great, except our window's gone, but we'll deal with that later. So now I've got this whole tile layout put together. And now I'm going to go back and create the real tile by beveling the corners and putting the material on it. So I'm going to go ahead and go down till I'm selecting one of these tiles. I'm going to move and copy it over here. I'm going to go edit, copy, and to get it out of this group, I'm going to close the group. And then I can go edit, paste in place. And I've moved something from inside a group to outside of a group, so which is something you might want to utilize for other things. So I've got this rectangle, and I want to make it into a tile. So first of all, I went to the manufacturer's website, and here is a JPEG of the tile that I downloaded from their site. So I'm going to use my paint bucket tool, and with my eyedropper, I'm going to go ahead and select that material. And then I'm going to paint it on the tile. And it looks like I need to place the tile. All right. Now I want to make a bevel edge on my tile. And because it's a component, if I bevel one of them, then all the other tiles that are in my shower already are going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the edit mode. And I'm going to use the arc tool. So if I click once, with the arc tool, click once and twice and make my arc. So this is what we're going to do in the end, but just normally what's going to happen when you make an arc is it comes with 16 sides. So then using the Follow Me tool, if I select the face, pick the Follow Me tool, pick this arc I've made, it looks like a great tile, right? But if I go ahead and go to View Hidden Geometry and see how many planes I've just made on this tile. So, and if you think about if you have this tile 500 times in your model, you've suddenly exponentially just made a huge, huge model. So, and that's the kind of thing that can start making your model crash. So, and the question is, if we go over to our tile over here and I turn off hidden geometry, it's like, can we even really see that there's all those nice fine beveled edges, especially if you zoom way back to where your model's gonna be. So we want to use a different strategy for making our arc. So let's go back to this model. And instead, when I make an arc this time, which is what my preset was, so if I start making it and I say that I want 3 sides to my arc, so I'm going to type in 3S, enter. You can see that my arc now has got, instead of all those little different edges, it's just got 3 edges. So then when I go ahead and use the Follow Me tool, click here, oops. Click Follow Me, click this little space I made, and then if I go ahead and turn on hidden geometry, you can see this is a much more manageable tile size, and it's not going to make my model get huge and crash. So think of that whenever you're making rounded curved shapes, like how round and perfect and curved does it really need to be? Yeah.
So I have a question.
Uh-huh.
You had not gone to 3S and you had softened the code pointer, which you still kind of like on a full nose tile.
Right, and I'm going to do that next time. I'm going to soften it, but you still, if you still, those planes are still all there. Yeah, so SketchUp still, it doesn't show the line, but it still counts them as all separate planes. So, which leads me, that's a great plant, to my next question. So if I go back over and turn off hidden geometry, but still I look at this, all I've suddenly got is this bunch of kind of way too many lines that becomes just this thick black line when you scroll out. So I can do that by softening the geometry. So I'm going to go ahead and triple click on this. I'm going to pick my eraser tool. And again, if you forget, it tells you down here what you need to do. So I'm going to hit Control, which is going to soften and smooth and take away all those extra lines. So I'll turn off hidden geometry so we can see this better. So if I go over all these lines, what it's going to do, it's going to just tell SketchUp not to show me all those black lines anymore, but it's still going to keep them there. It's still going to affect the geometry of the group or the component. But it's going to make it look a lot cleaner, especially if you start trying to print stuff out. All right, so let's go ahead and close that. Zoom out. So now our tiles, we have the kind of the edges, but we don't have all those big black lines. So it's great. The tile looks great, but we still have our window back here. So we're going to use something called Intersect with Model. In the Pro version of SketchUp, there's a whole bunch of things in the solid tools where there's lots of different ways you can intersect. But I'm just going to use the quick intersect model that comes with SketchUp Make, and you can explore the other ones on your own. Let's see, let's make us, just to show you quickly how this works. I'm going to make this a group. So I can take this, I can push it through something. So if you look at this, it's going through, but there's no black edges along here showing that it's a separate entity. It's still, if I hid this, it's still its own complete separate thing. It's not, the two components aren't interacting with each other. So if I select all of this and right click and say Intersect Faces with Model, you can now see that there's a black line around here. So those two groups have, are talking to each other and saying this is where we are in space. So if I hide this group, I can now see the lines that were left, and I can use a push-pull tool to push that through. So if you are using the solid tools, you can use the intersect with models, and it's automatically, you can say, I want this space to come out of this space, and it'll automatically push the button and it's gone. So the problem with our tile model is that when you do that, you have to have one group interacting with another group. And we have all these different tile models that need to interact with the one thing that we're going to push through. So they actually, unless you went one by one back and forth, although the SketchUp guys back there could probably tell me there's a way to get around that, I'm sure. But we're going to quickly do it this way. So I'm going to go ahead and take this window frame. Same thing, I can move it away in the red direction 10 feet. And what I want to do for this to work, these have to be exploded down to their base planes. So I can't use a group and to interact with a group and use intersect with model unless I'm using the solid tools. So I'm just going to quickly, I'm going to go to my window, I'm going to select everything, I'm going to right click, I'm going to say explode. And I'm going to keep going. Oops. Make sure I get this part down here. And you will know that you're done when it doesn't give you that option to explode anymore. So what I'm doing is breaking down all the tiles that have to go away. So now, as you can see, it's grayed out. It won't let me explode anything more. So I know that all the tile groups are exploded down to their individual planes and lines. So now I need to make something, a box that I can push through all these tiles, and I want it to be the size of this window, so I'm just going to make a rectangle in the window. I'm going to make that a group. And then I'm going to edit that group to make this box shape that I can then push through the window. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it. So now I've got this cube that's going through all the tiles that I want to cut. I can select everything. And as you can see, I want to make sure that all the tiles selected. I can go intersect faces with model. I can take this and hide it till I make sure that I did this right. And if you see, I've now got, I can select all the pieces of tile and delete them. Down here. And then I could take my window and move it back 10 feet. All right, so that's a quick, so whatever doors, windows, whenever you're trying to make a material match a space or trying to cut a window or cut something through it, just make something that's the size of your opening and just use intersect with model and make everything else quickly go away.
Now we have lost on tiles surrounding the windows, you have lost your groups.
Right, and that's the problem. So usually before I do this, I'm going to save a copy. So I'm going to make every other edit that I need to make. So that's why I added the texture. That's why I did the beveling and everything first. Because you're right, because once I've exploded, I have lost that group. Not in an easy way. I mean, someone geekier than me might be able to say, yeah, you can do that. So if you were using the solid tools, you could not have to explode everything, but you would have to edit one tile and then use the box component, and then, I mean, so you could quickly kind of click back and forth, and that way you wouldn't lose those if you were concerned about a client might want to put a different material on there later.
When you, on the right-hand side,
Uh-huh.
the example of pushing two shapes
Uh-huh.
to each other, they were both groups.
No, this one wasn't a group. Only the shape that went through it was a group. And if you're using the solid tools Intersect, they can both be groups, but again, then you have to have, you know, one group. You can't push one group through a multitude of groups. Is that true? Kind of? Yeah, you'd have to go back and forth, right? You'd have to go group by group. Yeah. And you could have done one by one like that, yeah. But you still would have had to go back and forth one by one, right? Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. So, right. So, yeah, that's another, right. In the SketchUp, there's always many ways to do things, and ways you could have done that. Yeah. This is not the best, it's the one you learned today, but it's just learning how to use the Intersect with Model Tool is, you know, because you probably aren't going to need to do this, but knowing how to use the tools, and then you can go and play with them and look at the solid Intersect with Model Tools, because if you just have one thing and one thing, it's much faster to do it that way. Anyway, my time is up. So I'm teaching a workshop this afternoon about editing components after I take a nap, and also about editing textures within components. So again, the main kind of point is finding stuff, making it look like something that you need quickly and efficiently. So if you are wanting to come this afternoon, everything I talk about is like a 2-day workshop, and I've got 3 hours this afternoon. So if there's something particular that you really like that you want to look at this afternoon, or if you want me to send you any other things I've referenced, just put your email down here and what you want to learn, and that way we're going to have a little democratic vote on what we actually covered this afternoon. But thank you all very much.